The ties between Max Weber's essay Politics as a Vocation and a political leader's take on race and ethnicity. So, Max Weber was a German socialist and political economist who was commonly known for his opinions and ideas that kind of contrasted to that of Karl Marx. Weber was a firm believer that not only did the property you own and the means of production you controlled play a role in determining one's status as Marx did, but he also believed that status and class played a more intimate role in determining one's influence in society and therefore their class and power as well. So in Max Weber's essay, Politics as a Vocation, we can draw a useful analogy to better understand Max Weber, to better understand Weber's theory of social status by first understanding how influence is gained from being a political leader and how that influence can be abused. This concept can be connected to politicians today. Donald Trump is an example. So I will discuss the concepts displayed in Politics as a Vocation and how they relate to Donald Trump and the effects his leadership has caused for racial minorities. Legitimations of domination. Tradition, so that's the ancient recognition and habitual orientation to conform. Charisma, the personal devotion and confidence in the qualities of individual leadership. And bureaucracy, which is legal. Belief in the validity of legal statute and competence based on rationally created rules. Obedience is expected when statutory obligations are carried out. So with tradition, Donald Trump is without a doubt a conservative man. From his policies to his own opinions that he states openly, he tends to take traditional standpoints. And some of his policies tend to push the government back rather than forwards when it comes to social rights and statutory laws. An example of this is his nominating Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Barrett has expressed that she plans on altering Roe v. Wade, which is essentially the primary abortion law in the U.S., this makes it so women are unable to receive abortions at certain points in their pregnancy. She doesn't believe that abortion will ever totally be illegal, but is pro-life. So we can infer that she could get it passed, that if she could get it past the Democratic nominees within the Senate, she would. Donald Trump has stated that one of the sole reasons he planned on nominating Amy was for her pro-life beliefs. This is a controversial topic, but it's really no question that altering this law is clearly a step back in women's rights, which is just another example, or an example of his traditional sort of standpoints. So older people, those who are not in sort of millennial status, grew up in a time where people were simply not treated fairly. Social rights were essentially non-existent, and those who advocated for the rights of minorities and civil rights were often labeled as unstable. Women couldn't get jobs, couldn't vote, and abortion was illegal around the world, which would cause unsafe illegal home abortion procedures. And when abortions were made illegal, they were still a little sketchy in terms of safety within hospitals. Discrimination was incredibly common and untaboo. And there were discriminatory laws. So racial segregation was an extremely common practice, and those of color were restricted to certain parts of residential areas and separate institutions, so schools, things like that. Businesses could allow only white patrons. People of color could only sit on the back of buses. There were even water fountains that were designated for certain races. There were discriminatory laws once that would back all the examples I just mentioned before. And people of color were essentially treated like aliens. And homophobia was also an accepted practice. So obviously people who lived and grew up in that time period may be partial to still have opinions and beliefs like that. I actually personally know someone who is well into their 70s and has expressed on some occasions their racist and homophobic views. The only difference now is this person is growing quieter and quieter about these views because now they're incredibly taboo, whereas when this person was growing up, they were not. So the Central Park Five is a group of 5 African American and Latino boys who were falsely convicted and imprisoned for the brutal rape and beating of a woman in Central Park on April 19th, 1989. This is an incredibly well-known case, and anybody who is familiar with it will know that the case was essentially built around making sure that these boys went down for it. It was kind of rigged around them, if that makes sense. When all of this was going down, Donald Trump would openly advertise his opinion. He would claim they should be forced to suffer and be executed. When the boys were released as men, Donald Trump said it was a disgrace. Another example to prove Trump's traditionalism would be the lawsuit he and his father, Fred Trump, faced. In 1973, Trump management was sued for discriminating against people of color and violating the Fair Housing Act. Both Fred and Donald were defendants in this case, and I feel these are only a few examples of some of the racist things Donald has said and done in the past that prove his traditional ways when considering this through a sociological perspective. So, charisma. So, drawing directly from Politics as a Vocation, what Weber states, men do not obey him by virtue of tradition or statute, but because they believe in him. So, I believe that Donald Trump appeals to a niche group within the United States. People will vote for him because they appeal to his traditional and outspoken ways. As a member of Gen Z, I think that for most of my life I've been shielded from and wasn't really aware of any sort of racism while growing up. But since I have developed my own thoughts and opinions and familiarized myself with social issues and politics, it seems to me that people who have those traditional views that we discussed before are, so to say, coming out of the woodwork. Donald Trump has provided a voice for those who want to spread hate, and his charisma has sparked an outburst and essentially provided his supporters with their own individual right to speak their racist views and otherwise behind the times sort of views, if that makes sense. So I believe that character and leadership plays a crucial role in establishing the values of any community or population of that leadership. I think supporting someone who has low moral character like Donald also says a lot about yourself and your values. Donald Trump is considered a charismatic leader in a much different way than Justin Trudeau, Martin Luther King Jr., Barack Obama, and Gandhi are in their own respective practices. He also uses slogans to homogenize misogyny, racism, and bigotry and fascism in our society. I think people are intrigued by this. I think they love to see someone different than those other charismatic leaders that I mentioned. Even I'm intrigued in a completely different context, of course, but the fact that someone can advocate views such as his and have a past like his and still even have the chance to run in an election to become the leader of a country kind of baffles me. So, police brutality has been a hot topic in the U.S. for a while now. There have been multiple riots protesting police brutality, but also some riots organized by Trump supporters that protest Black Lives Matter and the movement. I think charisma can be incredibly influential on the everyday person. It has the greatest impact when it comes to drawing followers in. Followers may see this charismatic leader as a role model, and therefore they're more likely to obey and agree with this person. I think this is where the radical behavior of Trump supporters comes from. He has essentially created a cult.